introduction, I want to say I'm very pleased to have with us three of our panelists. We are still hoping that the fourth panelist will join us. He's caught up in something, but is working very hard at joining us. We have three of our panelists. If you remember the title that went out when we were advertising about this talk, we were talking about education in Africa, education in Africa in the times of Corona, lessons from South Africa and Ghana. Now, the reason why we are talking about lessons from South Africa and Ghana is that within the African continent, there are a number of countries that have since reopened schools since they last closed schools because of Corona. And two of the countries that are at the forefront of that is Ghana and South Africa. I know they're not the only ones. I know that Cameroon may have also already opened their schools. We know that just this week, we had Tanzania open its schools. I know that Sierra Leone in the West was also talking about opening their schools in July. We know that South Africa has been back to school almost for 3 weeks, and Yande and Sarah, who are here, are going to tell us a little bit more. And we have panelists. They will be introducing themselves. Rebecca from Ghana. They opened schools for senior high and junior high. They're finalizing students for at least, I believe, 2 weeks. So having said that, I want us to, we're going to go into the next phase where they're going to introduce themselves, and then we are going to have a conversation. Perhaps if my computer behaves well, I am going to play two foundational questions that came from two teachers, just to kind of give a sense that, truly speaking, as teachers, those of us who have not been able to go back to school, we are currently thinking about a number of things as we imagine ourselves going back to school. Most countries are projected that they may be going back to school in September, but I know there are countries that are also not very sure whether they will go back to school that soon. I know that in Kenya recently, there was a plan to go back in September, and now there's a conversation that this might be delayed until January because of the infection concerns in the country. So it would be nice to find out what's been going on in Ghana, what's been going on in South Africa. I know that infections haven't really gone down in those two countries. Listening to news yesterday, South Africa, there was actually an alarm that the infections have actually shot up since in the last 1 week. So there are people who I would say stepped into the raging waters and opened their doors. And it would be interesting to find out how that's going on. So before we go on, I think it's important that we have the panelists just introduce themselves. And so I'm going to travel down to South Africa, and I'm going to ask the two ladies. We'll start with Yandi, who will introduce herself briefly, and then we'll have Sandra, and then we'll have Rebecca introduce themselves. So Yandi, to you.
Okay, afternoon, everyone, and all the panelists and everyone who's tuned in from around the continent. My name is Yandisa Majotina. I'm a teacher in high school. I teach English and history. And as Irina said, we've been back at school for the past 3 weeks. And yeah, very interested to speak about education in the times of COVID, as well as African education in general.
Thank you, Yandi. Sandra, please introduce yourself.
Blessed afternoon to you all teachers across Africa and to every person who's tuning in. My name is Sandra Piri. I am a passionate foundation phase teacher in one of the private schools here in Polokwane, one of the best schools in the city. I'm a teacher by passion, and I believe that teacher is more of a calling than it is a profession. And I believe that we've all been entrusted with those young, precious minds for us to enrich them, in enabling them to be able to think for themselves and becoming the best versions of themselves. Therefore, I believe that for me as a teacher, my duty is to nurture them in their different uniqueness. Thank you.
Thank you, Yandi. Very apt presentation. And now we'll move to West Africa and have Rebecca, who is joining us from Ghana, to introduce herself.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Nana Isi Hassan, a public school teacher with the Ghana Education Service, the Adenta Directorate, and I'm a junior high school teacher. I'm very passionate about impacting knowledge and training minds.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Rebecca teaches at junior high and she teaches integrated science. We have Sandra, who is teaching in a private school, and she works with the younger children at the lower grade. And then we have Yandi, who is also a secondary school teacher in a public secondary school, and she teaches languages. So with that introduction, we're still looking forward to having Sahe join us, who is a maths teacher, primary school maths teacher, teaches year 7 in one of the top schools or municipal schools in Cape Town. We are still hopeful that he will be able to join us at some point during this conversation. So I can see that from our polls, just an update, yes, we still have East, West, South, North, and Central as the participants who have joined in. So that's a real great representation of the continent in our first conversation. And I know that there are those who may actually be listening in from Facebook. So, so once again, before we go into the matters of education and especially in the times of Corona, I think because we come from different different schools, and perhaps our education systems might be a little different, I'm going to ask Yandi to give us a little bit of a breakdown of the education system of South Africa. How is the structure? What are the levels that the students have to move in? And then we'll go to Ghana and have Rebecca make some statement about Ghana, because, for example, she's talked about junior high. Not all African schools perhaps have what they call junior high. So just a little bit of a breakdown of the structure. In 1 minute, Yandi, could you just run us through how education looks like in South Africa in terms of structure?
Okay, the structure of the system, we have 4 phases. The first phase being foundation phase, and this is my son. Smooth.
Okay.
We have foundation phase, so that would be grades R to 3. And then we have what you call the senior phase, which would be years 4 up until year 9. And then from grades 10 to 12, that's what we call the FET phase. So it's called further education and training. Those are basically the phases we have, both in these kind of overlap between public as well as private. So you should find definitely the same kind of system in both sectors.
Okay, Rebecca, how does the structure of education look like in Ghana?
Okay, here in Ghana, we've got a very nice structure, starting with a basic education. Now, basic education has preschool, which is 2 years, primary school 6 years, and then the junior high school for 3 years. Then the secondary education, which is also 3 years, and then tertiary, which is 4 years. So in Ghana here, a child is expected to have 11 years of basic education. Until quite recently, the major stakeholder of education, which is the government, requires that every citizen of school-going age should have 14 years of basic education, spanning from preschool right down to the senior high school.
Yeah. So, thank you. So I guess the namings might be different, but most of us from most of the countries in East Africa and South Africa, if you listen to what you're talking about, the number of years spent before going to tertiary level or what our university is almost the same. And I think, as Yandi insinuated, both in Ghana and in South Africa, as is the case with other schools, other countries, we also have private schools, and we're very excited that we have Sandra here who is teaching in a private school, and so she'll give us a little bit of an angle of how things have panned out within the private school sector. And remember, what we're trying to do as we listen is that perhaps we'll not just be talking about either what the challenges are or what the opportunities are, but as we listen, the idea is that we will be trying to capture for ourselves what lessons we might carry with us as individual teachers, and that we might go with as we prepare to go back to school for those of us who've not gone to school, or that we can borrow even between, let's say, South Africa and Ghana, and see that South Africa was ahead of us. What is it that we can learn from them? Or Ghana has just come in, but they've come in with some new ideas that we can also still build into those of us who are already in school. So it's a day to learn from one another while also still talking about the real challenges or the realities on the ground, because it is important that we share what is really happening as has been the case, and see what that means for us. So now we're going to go into the next section of our conversation, which is what all of us have been waiting for. And before we go into that, I just want to point out to the participants that on the screen, you will see that we have a place for polls, and we have a place for chat, and then we have a place for question and answer. So as we speak, as you're listening to the panelists share their experiences, in case there's something that you want to present out as a question, please feel free to type it out in the question and answer section. I'll be keeping an eye on that. The panelists will be keeping an eye on that, and we will try to pick them out and build them into the conversation. And then at some point, we'll have a time when we'll actually ask for a few of us to actually go live and ask questions to the panelists. Now, in terms of the structure of our conversation today, I'm going to try and share my screen and share two questions from two teachers who actually will set the context of the threads of conversation that we are going to have. I will submit that this is something I'm trying for the first time. So if it doesn't work, we'll just come back and I'll tell you what the teachers were saying. So let's see if it works. Please listen out, because it's just going to be the audios. So the first audio is going to come from a teacher from Nigeria who sent in a pre-recorded question. Let's. Oh, okay, so that was question number one. I hope that we had the question. Did you hear the question? We didn't hear the question. Okay, so I will not try playing it now, because I think I tried and it wasn't working last time I tried. But that was basically, it was a question from a teacher, a secondary school teacher from Nigeria. And she was asking a question. She's saying, Corona seems not to be going away anytime. And so the question she's asking is it really safe for teachers and students to go back to school? And I think the second person that I was going to play her pre-recorded question, and I will try to get this right during this period, is actually from Mary J. So you all notice that these talks have been named Mary J. And you may have been wondering, who is Mary J? So Mary J is actually my mother, and she's a retired school teacher. She retired, she worked for over 30 or 40 years as a public primary school teacher. at different levels, finishing as a head teacher in a number of schools in Kenya. But even after she retired, because she loves teaching so much, she started her own school. So currently she's running a primary school, a private primary school. And her first question was linked to what the lady from Nigeria asked. And part of what she's saying is she would really be interested to hear from the teachers from Ghana and from South Africa, what kind of preparation they got themselves into to adequately prepare themselves to go back to school even during the times of Corona, because she assumes and she understands that Corona is still an issue in Ghana and Corona is still an issue in South Africa. So what kind of preparation did you people have to get into? And those two questions are going to launch us into the first segment of our conversation. So the first segment of our conversation, we are going to ask our panelists to think back to their going back to school, perhaps days before school was open, their school was open, and the first day at school. And we want them to very briefly share with us some of the things that were going on in their mind, any preparation that they had to get themselves into, and what happened. What are some of the significant things or observations they made on the first day that they went back to school? So this time I will start with Rebecca. Rebecca just went back to school recently. So we'll go to Ghana and listen to Rebecca. What was going on in your mind as you thought about going back to school, knowing that Corona is still around with us? And can you share with us how the first day looked like when you actually finally arrived in school?
Well, the pandemic took everyone by surprise and it stalled academic work. But personally, going back to school, I was a bit indifferent. I had some fears, but in as much as the fears were there, I also felt that if we adhere to the safety protocols, then we are safe. And the first day at school was quite okay. What happened was that the Ghana Education Service, as part of the measures to help the various schools curb the situation, they brought SPPs, nose masks, hand sanitizers, and hand washing buckets. And so the first day we mounted the hand washing bucket. We realized that some of the children were not so much into the washing of hands. But then we were not quite disturbed about it because we felt once school actually is in session and we get the education down to them, then they are going to stick with it. And I must say, so far it's been okay. The new normal protocols are being observed. It's not easy being in the nose mask for close to 4 hours teaching, but then we've been okay. For the 5 days, it's been fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, for starting us on a very positive note and giving us a lot of hope. As you say, you started off with a sense of fear, but you went in and safety precaution measures were put in place. You had PPEs given to you, and while the students were not very keen to follow the instructions at the beginning, you didn't panic, which I think is a very good posture to have, and you committed yourself to actually making them follow the rules as time goes by. And you say so far, 1 week down the line, you're feeling like everything seems okay. Your observation there, though, is that students might have a challenge putting on masks for a long period of time. We'll go down to South Africa and find out how things have been. Yandi, you also teach in a public secondary school. Tell us a little bit about the first days at school, any preparation activities that you may have had been involved in, who was in charge of that, and what your view or your feeling as a teacher was in the first days of being in school and the key observations.
Okay, so we went back On the 1st of June, officially, that was the first day for most of us back. It was, there was a bit of confusion in the country surrounding what was going to happen on the 1st, because we had heard that we were going to go back on, we were supposed to go back, I think a week prior. And so, you know, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, and it didn't inspire a lot of confidence in teachers. And I think it really, you know, caused anxiety. And what I remember from the first day and speaking to my colleagues was people were very afraid to be at school. People were afraid that they would catch the virus, that they'd get sick, etc. And that, you know, in essence, we had been left on our own. We had, our unions had in essence now also agreed that, you know, we could go back if the minimum um, if the minimum requirements were met, and that was PPEs were delivered, hand sanitizers, and yeah, that's all I can think of. So the first day we eventually got the PPEs, but there was still, you know, lots of confusion as to who's supposed to do the training and the orientating us around the health and safety protocols. So what we could do, I think we did, and we read through the government issued manual, and still I don't think it allayed people's fears. Even I think this week, people are still very fearful as to what is going to happen. So I'm happy to hear that in Ghana, you know, it was a very different story. But I think from us, because of the initial confusion and the kind of lack of consultation, it really caused, I think, a lot of anxiety in a lot of people. And I think they still are very anxious.
Okay, thank you, Yandi, for saying it as it is. And I think the lesson there is that the less the confusion at the higher level in terms of the public communication about what's going on, because I think the background of what you're talking about is that in South, there was a pronouncement that you're going to go to school, and then that was called back, and there was a little bit of uproar in the public arena. And so you're saying that then created a sense of confusion amongst the teachers. And the other thing that you've pointed out is that when you arrived in school, as much as the PPEs were actually provided, there's a little bit of a confusion in terms of who was supposed to train you about some of the things you're supposed to adhere to in your school. So anybody taking notes from other countries who are planning to open, I think the lessons there is hopefully there wouldn't be too much confusion about the messages being sent from the public square, from our policymakers. And secondly, that a little bit of thinking about the training is very, very important, so that when the teachers come in, there's a little bit of clarity on what's going to go on. But we have with us Sandra, who is from private school, and I can see already somebody's asking, did things play around the same way in private school compared to public school? So Sandra, we're going to come to you, and we're just going to ask you to tell us a little bit what preparation looked like, or what you're thinking about when you're told you're now going to go back physically to your campuses, and how was the first day, or what were your key observations? How did things pan out, especially in terms of preparation, training, and getting in to actually physically teach your students?
Okay, afternoon to you all once more.
So Sandra, you need to, okay, good.
Can you all hear me now?
No, it's a little low.
Oh, okay, I hope you can hear me now. All right. Okay. With us, personally, I was a bit anxious on how things were going to turn out to be because of this whole thing of putting on masks the whole day. That was what I was most anxious about than anything else, because I am thinking here we are expected to put on masks the whole day and the whole time we're with each other, and not only us, but as well as those young ones that are not used to all this, this new concept. So, but I'm very grateful that things did turn out very well for us, because we got training prior to all this. I'm most grateful to our leader, the executive head, Annabelle Roberts, who was in charge of the training. Videos were sent through to all teachers and all staff that taught us what was expected of us, what we were going to face out there, and how we were to protect ourselves and the young ones. And she went on further to create a quiz for all of us that enabled us, after watching the video, to give our feedback by answering questions, so that she assessed our understanding in regards to the COVID-19 and what was expected of us. So this gave us as teachers individually feedbacks on how one performed, and those that might have not performed well, they had to go and make a follow-up and try to explain further and assure us that we were going to win this together. So our first day was quite exciting, you know, seeing the young ones, exciting to be back at school. And I think the excitement of putting on mask, but little did they know that that was the new norm, and they were expected to keep the mask on throughout the day. So temperatures were being checked at the entrance point. There were certain forms that students had to fill in, questionnaires that kids were asked, and parents had to wait for their child. When a green light was given, then the child can go through into the classroom, and the parents will then be excused. No parents were allowed in campus. Only one grade was allowed 1 day a week. So that made it quite profitable for us to maintain our social distancing, as there were not a lot of grades at the same time.
Thank you, Sandra. You're actually pushing us into the next point of conversation. But I think just in terms of preparation, the key takeaway that you can get from the three panelists is that feeling anxious and feeling afraid is okay. Everybody from Ghana down to South Africa, there was a sense of anxiety. There was a sense of feeling a little fearful, because we know, I mean, they were stepping back into the school with the understanding that the coronavirus or the pandemic is still on. So feeling a little anxious is okay. But the other thing that has come out as a key lesson to think about is the preparation. So talking from Ghana to South Africa and looking at the two levels, I think the difference which Sandra presents, so both Sandra and Yandi were feeling anxious, but I think the difference is that in Sandra's school, there was a little bit of leadership. There was a sense of somebody who is a leader took responsibility of trying to allay those fears, but also to train the teachers in terms of some of the things or how they were going to handle themselves to minimize the risk of being infected. And I like the fact that it was actually interactive. There was a sense of ownership, because there was opportunity for the teachers to ask questions or to actually demonstrate whether they had understood well. And I think that's also very important.